Hi, and welcome back to the Turning 30 podcast, a place where we talk about what it's really like to turn 30. I'm your host, life coach Emma Wilson, and I'm here to help you feel better, get unstuck, and be more confident in your 30s. I love the fact that this week's guest episode is with a client who has been with me for the past maybe 3.5 years. Nikki, she was on the podcast already twice before. I'll explain in the episode what she spoke on and why she was there. But I've invited her back this week to talk all about the updates in her journey so far. And what I do want to say is, as a coach, I work with many clients in my one-on-one container, in my group container, and it's such a privilege to be alongside so many women's journeys in their 30s to see how their lives change, whether it be from going through huge transitions or just to internal changes. And it's honestly one of the greatest privileges of being a coach is to be alongside people whilst they're going through these big life changes. But then a lot of the time what happens is at some point, we often work together for sometimes a year, sometimes less, sometimes more. But often I then see all the updates that happen after. Now, something really special about Nikki is that we not only have worked together on and off and are still working together today for the last 3.5 years, but we also have become friends. So I'm also updated about her life, even when we're not working together. And it's been so incredible to watch her journey and to see how her life has unfolded and all of the things that have happened. And her story is, I honestly think, really, really unique and really inspirational. And I want her to tell it to you in her own words. I think it's much better than me giving you a little summary. So I'll leave you on a cliffhanger, but I will say that this episode is specifically for you if your life and the stage that you're at right now isn't exactly what you expected it to be, if you thought that you would have met somebody at a certain age or a certain point and that hasn't happened yet, if you have wanted to become a mother and it's something that feels far away for you. And I think that her journey and what she's probably going to talk about and explain about the expectations that she had for her life and how it actually transpired can really just give hope and faith to those of us who our journey hasn't been exactly like we thought. And that's why I really love inviting clients onto the Turning 30 podcast and those who have stories that are against the timelines, doing their own thing, whether it's because it's chosen or not chosen. And yes, I think that you're going to love this episode. Now, I do want to give a disclaimer that we're talking in the episode about parenthood in terms of that being a want as a milestone and also even being in a relationship. Maybe for you, you're listening and that isn't what you want right now. And that's also completely normal and okay. But I hope that you can take away from this episode that it's not necessarily about the thing we're talking about. It's about the mindset involved. It's about the being able to be on your own timeline and do your own thing, let go of expectations, and to not know ever what is waiting for you just around the corner. Now, in the episode, I am also sharing a life update that I haven't ever shared before on the podcast. So many of you tune into my Instagram and you'll probably have seen, but for those of you who don't follow me on Instagram and haven't seen, you're in for some nice surprises. So really hope you enjoy that episode. If you think that Nikki's story and my journey were to help anyone in your life that you know who is struggling right now with the timelines and the milestones and thinking that they're left behind in their 30s, then please feel free to share. And if you could go and hit like, subscribe, 5 stars on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. And if you're listening on YouTube, if you could also hit subscribe, that would be really great because I really want to get this episode into as many ears as possible. And on that note, let's dive in. Hey, Nikki, and welcome back for the 3rd time to the Turning 30 podcast.
Hi, Emma. Thank you. I feel very privileged to be a 3rd time attending guest, so thank you for having me.
I think you're the first. yeah, you're the first person who's been on here 3 times, which is really fun and actually makes sense, seeing as our relationship has evolved and we've been through so much together over the past, was it 3 years that we've known each other? 3 years we've been working together.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was looking back earlier at like how long, when we had our first session, it was like August 2020, and how much
Wow.
life has changed since then. It's a bit mad.
I know, and that's obviously what we're here to discuss today is life changes and to update the listeners. So I know many of you are listeners who've been with us for years, and you probably will have heard both of Nikki's previous podcast episodes. And I also know that many of you are new here and new to the community. So just before we dive in, Nikki, I'll give a little summary of the last episodes that you were on. So Nikki, exactly as you said, since August 2020, has been a client of mine, and we've been working together on and off, not obviously the whole time, but for until today. And at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, you were, I think when we first started working together, you were doing your third round of egg freezing, or you had just started your third round, and then we recorded an episode together, I think almost a year later, about egg freezing. So the first episode that Nikki came onto the podcast was sharing her journey of egg freezing. And actually, I think we're going to see this pattern a lot in this episode, that I basically copy you and everything you do in life. But I also did my egg freezing following that. And then you also came back on the podcast for an episode where we did a group discussion about how to reclaim your 30s. And you came on as one of the clients of a group program, the Reclaim group program that I had run, which again was quite a while ago, actually. I think that was a year and a half ago that we recorded that. And I've invited you back on today because, as we're going to hear, you've had some amazing life updates, lots of big changes. And actually, it's going to be the first time that I'm sharing some life changes that I've been going through in the past few months as well. And I've called the podcast episode "You'd Never Know What's Around the Corner." And I think that the aim of the episode is really to inspire and give hope to listeners who potentially feel left behind, or feel like maybe all their friends are doing one thing and it's not what they want to do, and they just feel like things are maybe working out slower than they thought in their 30s. So the last time the audience heard from you, do you remember what was going on? That was in, I think, I can't remember what you shared in that episode, but we did the group program in, it was October, November 2021, I want to say.
Yeah.
What was going on with you then?
So I think when we started the group program, I was single. And when we finished the group program, I had just met Liam. So life has like changed like unrecognizably in the last, nearly 2 years. So on December the 6th, I met Liam in 2021. And now sitting here in 2023, I am married, I have a child, and I'm sat in Singapore because we've relocated to Singapore 2 months ago. So life couldn't be more different to how it was in 2021.
Oh, I know that I know your story and I've been along for the journey with you, but even you just saying that is like goosebumps when we think about how much you've been through. And just for the sake of those who haven't heard the episode where we did talk about the Reclaim, the purpose of the Reclaim program was that I invited a group of single women who really wanted to work on owning their timelines in their 30s and building their next chapter, not even just in love, but obviously it was a group of single women. So we were speaking a lot about dating and about relationships and love life. What had your life looked like before then, before you met Liam? I guess if you can just summarize, like the years before, what you had gone through and what was going on with you.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess where it kind of all started in terms of pre the group coaching and really then finding you to work with you. In February 2019, I came out of a relationship that was very toxic and not a pleasant one to be in. But at the time of being in that relationship, I thought that was it. I thought that was my happy ending. We were going to get married and have kids. Anyway, so we split in February 2019. And I was in a job that I really enjoyed, but I was newly single. I was grieving the life that I thought I was going to have. I sold an apartment that I'd had for 10 years because I decided I wanted change. So I moved to a new area. I got promoted in my job. And I was just kind of navigating this new normal for me. And I initially had this huge relief of being out of this toxic relationship and was excited about the future. But quite quickly, about 6 months later, unfortunately, everything started to kind of really affect my mental health, and I became really unwell. I actually took 4 months out of my job and really took some time to kind of focus on getting better. I'd kind of had quite a severe period of depression. And as part of the kind of time out that I took, I actually went to Bali for 6 weeks, which is kind of really the pivotal moment in like my life. It is when I got to focus on just being me. And I use the term like just being Nikki. And I think that was the start of like the turning point of like the change that I've gone through over the last few years. And I almost had to go through that extreme low to start this like upward trend again. And I started working with you the following August. And by then I was like feeling a lot better. My mental health was in a much better place. I was still single. And I came to you because I remember listening to an episode that you'd done with a mutual friend, Jenny, which was all around being single in your 30s. And I guess I wanted to reclaim and take back control of like my narrative and move away from the comparison that was like had been really plaguing me. And that's when I started working with you. But in amongst all of this, I knew I wanted to be a mum, and I'd been desperate to have kids since I was about 21. Now being a mum much later, I'm like, how would I have coped at a 21-year-old mum? But anyway, and so I then started the process of going through egg freezing. And actually that came off a conversation that I had with 3 girls that I met in Bali who were American, and they'd all done egg freezing. And it kind of opened my eyes to this thing where I was like, wow, okay, so I'm desperate to have kids. Here's a way for me to do something about it and to like reclaim like control, I guess. And so I started that process of egg freezing. And as you said, I went through 3 rounds of it. And it was quite grueling physically, emotionally, mentally. But equally, I had this huge sense of like relief that I'd taken control of things. And I guess I kind of given myself an insurance policy of having these frozen eggs. And it may not pay out, but it was just reassuring to have it. And of course, in amongst all of this, we're talking about COVID times. So we were literally in lockdown. So I had a lot to kind of battle with, of feeling like this loss of like not being able to be out there and meeting people. So it was a really like challenging period, but it was a time that I invested so heavily in myself and did huge amounts of work with you that was really transformative. And without being cringy, there is no way that had I not done the work with you that I would be where I am today, like without a doubt. And that actually gives me goosebumps just saying it, but it's really, really true. Like it was transformative, and it allowed me to literally just be Nikki and learn that just being Nikki was enough. So yeah, that's kind of my story up until now, where things couldn't be more different.
Yeah, wow, I love that so much. And, you know, again, because like I said, I've copied everything you do in life. We've been living parallel lives, but just on a bit of a delay. I also, when I went through this breakup from a toxic relationship, then spent over 2 years going through this personal change, this huge change, and also learning about myself. Obviously, I was doing lots of coaching. I was also coaching others, but it's just now we can look back when we're in the stage of life where we are now and have so much gratitude for doing all that work and for actually prioritizing that. And I just want to say that because I think a lot of listeners here are maybe still in relationships that they are nervous to leave because they're nervous to be single in their 30s, or they've already come out of a relationship and they're struggling to be in that space of when will it happen for me? And it's so easy to get into that victim-y place that I'm sure both of us were in at some point. But both of us can really testify to how important that time is. And now that I've met someone and I'm also on my journey, and obviously your life has changed so much and you've got all the things that you were hoping for, that you were wanting, I feel this like almost this extreme sense of gratitude for that past version of me who was in a lot of pain and had a lot of healing to do and did have to invest a lot of time and energy. And also, again, you had Bali, I had Costa Rica, where I went for a few months. It was during COVID, and had a really life-changing experience. And I think that as much as those times were challenging and hard, and I wouldn't, it's not like, oh, it's great to go through a big breakup and have the fear that you have around what's going to happen next. Wow, I'm so grateful I have it. Like sometimes I want to cry thinking about, wow, I'm so pleased that was my path. And I didn't feel like that at the time, obviously. You don't really feel like it, obviously, until you look back in hindsight and you can see. But do you feel the same, that same sense of like, I'm so happy it worked out that way? And it, you know, obviously our life timelines weren't what we expected, right? For me, I didn't expect to be single at 35. It was like such a big smack in the face, if I'm being honest. But now that I'm looking back, I'm like, phew, I'm so happy that I was.
Yeah, totally. And do you know what? One of the things that's always stayed with me from when you and I were coaching, well, we still are, but during that period was I'm exactly where I'm meant to be right now. And I remember when you said it to me at first, I was a bit like, yeah, but I'm not, because I want to be married and I want to have kids and I want all of this. And actually, like, you were exactly right. I was exactly where I was meant to be at that time, because without having done all that work, I wouldn't be where I am now. And so there is a huge gratitude, and that's a really good way to describe it. I'm so thankful for everything that did happen to me, albeit some of it was really challenging. It got me to where I am today and to the person I am today. And I wouldn't have perhaps ended up in the situation I am in now, where I'm married and have a baby, you know, all of those things, had I not experienced those things in my life in the past. So yeah, definitely a huge sense of gratitude.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? When we did that work and we were doing those sessions about really finding that acceptance and finding that, you know, we practiced that specific thought of this is how it's supposed to be, or this is where I'm meant to be. Did you believe it at the time, or did you manage to accept it at the time, or do you think the acceptance only came afterwards?
I think when we first started kind of practicing that thought, I was a bit like, okay, I'll go with it and hopefully I'll get there. But it took me a while, and I think I can appreciate it more now in hindsight, obviously being where I am now. But I think it definitely gave me some comfort when we were working on that thought, because I guess it was kind of like, rather than focusing on the negatives and what you said actually about the victim mentality, rather than being like, oh, I'm the only one of my friends who's not with someone and I'm the only one that doesn't have kids, actually it was flipping that narrative around and focusing on all the things I did have and the opportunities I did have. And that massively helped to kind of shift and to allow me to be like, actually, yeah, you know what, I am where I'm meant to be. And looking back, I don't regret any of the things that have happened. And some of them I'm really thankful for. Like, for example, I said it at the start, I wanted to be a mum when I was 21. I'm so grateful that I wasn't a mum at 21. And that's no slight on anyone who is a young mum. But for me, I wouldn't have got to establish my career in the way I did. I wouldn't have traveled. I wouldn't have had so many of the life experiences that I've had now that I'm super, super grateful for. And I guess you just have to trust. And in the moment, it's really hard. And like, the worst thing people used to say to me was like, don't worry, there's plenty more fish in the sea, or you'll find your person. And oh my God, those phrases used to drive me up the wall. But I hate to say it, and people will hate me for saying it, but it will happen. And actually, like, trusting and believing in it, and sitting in that thought of I'm exactly where I'm meant to be right now, I guess allowed me to then move forward with my life.
Wow. I love that. And I want to share, like, I was thinking about if I asked myself that question, what I would answer. And I think it's basically what you were saying. But I think I worked on that belief a lot, and I did believe it most of the time, but it did fluctuate. And that's why I wanted to say is that it's not like black and white. Like, I just decided to believe it and then I just believed it. It was like I led my life exactly like you said you did, trying to believe it. So finding comfort in those words and doing all the things, like really focusing on my business, for example. You were focusing on your career and you know, still dating and still putting myself out there and giving people chances, and also traveling a lot and making the most of being alone, and for me living alone, which was like, you know, a big part of those years for me as well. It didn't mean that was a constant for those over 2 years. I constantly felt that way. And there were so many triggers. And that you mentioned that when people used to say that there's plenty of fish in the sea, for me, those triggers were when I would date someone and then maybe get rejected, or it didn't work out, or someone that I liked ghosted me, or, you know, things like this happened then. Yeah. Or for example, when other people were to reach milestones, so when best friends got married or announced they were pregnant, they were the hard times. And it was in those times that I think it was the most hard to keep the faith and the most hard to think, oh, it will happen eventually. But I always, and I guess this is what the coaching work helps you do, manage to get round back to the thought, even if it meant journaling on steroids and having to have more coaching sessions, or having to really, you know, just go back into my belief system. And I just remember it was so triggering when people used to say things like, but it will happen for you. Of course it will. There's no reason why it wouldn't. So I get if anyone's listening and you're like, oh God, like here they go. They're both in a different stage of life. So of course they would say that. I think we both know how it feels to be on the other side. Like it's both of us haven't been in relationships for that long that we don't remember that really awful feeling of somebody who's got the thing you want saying to you, oh, it will come. Don't worry.
Totally. And I think whilst, yes, we're both really fortunate, we have all those things that we wanted, we both arrived at them late, if you were to listen to society, right? Like I was 35 when I met Liam, and that is considered like late and you're old. And when I found out I was pregnant, I'm a geriatric mother. Like there's a lot of societal labels that say you're not in the timeline you should be. And so I think all of that kind of rhetoric as well in the background, we still experienced that and like had to deal with a lot of that. So I can absolutely like empathize and identify with a lot of the feelings, and they still feel raw in some ways. Whilst I've got like everything I wanted, I guess that brings a whole other set of like challenges, perhaps isn't the right word, but emotions and things that you have to work through as well.
Totally. And I want to ask you, and think we'll talk about it in a bit, about some of the challenges of going through big life changes quickly, which I think is happened to you and to me. And I'm like being bold saying this, and it's no offense to anyone listening who is that person who tries to give words of comfort to friends that when they have reached the milestones and their friends haven't. But when you've reached it, and I'm experiencing this now, when you've reached a point in your life where you've got the milestone, right? So whether that's being in a relationship or buying a house or getting engaged or being pregnant, it just feels like, oh, like not that was easy, but it just, you forget the struggle in a way. And also it feels like, for me, I guess this is the first time I'm saying it on the podcast, this is a bit of a bomb to drop, but I'm pregnant. And again, it's similar to you. I found out I was pregnant the week after my 36th birthday. I also met Ellie, my partner, a few months after my 35th birthday. So I think very, very similar ages in terms of birthdays and everything and timelines of when it happened. And I think that it's like, yeah, I did feel old when it happened. Like it did feel like waiting. And it also did feel like society was saying, hurry up. And I was also, could never imagine at the age of 25, 26, if you would have told me you will be a mother for the first time just before your 37th birthday, I would have been really surprised. You know, I would have been gutted, to be honest, because I genuinely just presumed that would happen, especially relationship before 30 or around 30 and kids before 35, if not like close to 30. But I think once you get to that phase, you almost forget that. So now I feel like I'm like in the middle of a teen pregnancy. I always say that. People keep asking me like, have I had a few questions about like, how is it to be pregnant at 36? And I'm like, I feel so young. And I just want to say that because I think that we can feel sometimes when we're single and we don't have those things, we can almost feel a little bit of animosity or a little bit of a lack of understanding from our friends who have the things. But now I'm on the other side of it so quickly from when I was on the flip side. I kind of want to say that you have to hold almost some empathy for that. Both sides need empathy for each other, because I now feel like I look at my single friends and I'm like, yeah, but I know it will happen for them. And like, actually 36 isn't that old. And, you know, and if I knew it was as easy as just to get pregnant, maybe I wouldn't have even done it so quickly and all those thoughts. And it's like, I don't know, I'm getting a bit confused with what I'm saying. Apart from that, I understand now so clearly both sides. And I think that we don't want to forget as women how hard it is to be 30 to 36 and not have those things if you want them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like, even now when I talk about the fact I was 36 when I had my son, I still do struggle a little bit with the fact that I was 36 when I had my son. Like in that I would have, in an ideal world, I still would have loved to have been a mum earlier on. And that doesn't take away from the fact that everything I've said, like I'm glad that actually things played out in the way that they did. But there is still part of me that's like, oh, but you know, like I'm an older mum and oh, I'll be 40 in a few years' time. And, you know, there are still like timelines still play out for me, even though like I've now like reached those milestones. And I think whatever stage of life you're in, actually, there's always going to be that next milestone. Like I keep freaking out about the fact I'm 40 in 3 years' time. And I don't know why, but there's something about like these like age related milestones that just is triggering. And I think that'll always be like something that I kind of battle against. despite having reached some of those milestones, because there's always going to be another milestone you want to reach. So I think you can still empathize with someone who's going through some of those thoughts and feelings, because we've been there and we've kind of experienced it as well.
Exactly. And I think, I can't remember where I've seen it on like an illustration or an animation or something on Instagram, but it's so true. There's always that next step. It's like, if you're single, when are you going to meet someone? If you're with someone, when are you going to take the plunge and get engaged? If you're going to get engaged, like, when are you going to have a baby? And then as soon as you have one baby, and probably this is happening to you, people are already saying, when are you having another one? And it's like, people even say it to me now, like, you're going to have another one soon after, which is another consequence of being 36 and pregnant, is that people presume, right, that's it, you're just going to pop out, however many children all at the same time. And I'm like, whoa. Hold on, like, this is not part of the conversation. But I guess it's just society's pressures for things to happen, A, in a certain order, and B, quickly, just because everyone likes things to happen very nicely, neatly, in a certain way. Now, I'd love to go back to your story. And so we've kind of covered the last 2 years, and now we're before you met Liam, which was coming up to your anniversary. Right? Your 2 anniversary. So I think this will be released as an anniversary present for both of you, which is nice. So you met Liam. Can you just share a little bit about the events that happened after you met him, and I guess the experience of meeting him? And what I would love to share, and I also will share my side of what it is like to meet someone at 35 instead of at 25 or a little bit younger.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually signed up to a dating agency. The first time I guess I've spoken about it publicly. And that was because I'd kind of tried all the dating apps and everything like that. And I was just getting frustrated. And the agency that I signed up for, it was actually a blind date that I went on with Liam, because I basically kind of, when I briefed them of what it was I was looking for, my brief was very different to perhaps what it would have been before. Before, it was, I guess, more superficial. I was like, they have to be a certain height, they have to look a certain way, they have to be this, that, and the other, they have to have X status. And actually, when I briefed the agency, who I then met Liam through, my number one criteria was, I just want someone kind. Like, that is the number one thing that I wanted. So basically, Liam and I, we went on a date on December the 6th, 2021. Blind date. Couldn't find him in the bar initially, which is a brilliant story to recount to everyone, because it was at the Corinthia. It was a bar with 4 corners, and he told me he was in the corner, but I walked past him twice. But anyway, we finally settled down for our first date.
And you hadn't seen a picture of him at all? Like, it was completely blind? Is that the rule of the dating agency?
That's the rule. I won't lie, I may have managed to stalk him, even though they didn't give me his full name. But I did manage to find him basically on LinkedIn. Thanks, LinkedIn. I'm sure they probably wouldn't encourage it for dating. But anyway, I had basically managed to find a picture of him. And Liam knows this, so I don't think it's a problem to share the story. But in the picture that he had, which was like 10 years old, he had like brown spiky hair. So when I went to the bar, obviously he didn't know that I'd stalked him, so he had no idea I thought I was looking for a certain person. And I was walking around this bar and I was like, there is no person here with brown spiky hair. Anyway, by the time I met him, I know, right? By the time I met him, he'd shaved his head. So he didn't look like his picture, because obviously I was preset of like, this is what I should be looking for. Anyway, I quickly found him, and then we sat down for our first date. And I remember like just thinking, oh, this guy seems like really genuine and like kind, and he was a bit older, and I knew all of that before I'd kind of met him. I don't think for either of us that first date was like, oh my God, that's it, I've met the one, I've met the love of my life. Like, it wasn't that like crazy sparks that I guess perhaps society or romance rom-coms would tell you happens. It wasn't that, and it wasn't a particularly long date either. It was in the midst of me being in a crazy period of work. So anyway, I kind of remember leaving the date and thinking, oh, like, he seemed like a nice guy, like, who knows if it'll kind of go anywhere. And then the dating agency do all the follow-up with you, and I was like, yeah, I'd be up for a second date. And they said, oh, he's really interested and he'd be up for a second date. And by the way, the actual truth is that he actually said to them, I'm not sure she's interested in me, but if she wanted to go on a second date, I would. So I was like, okay. Anyway, so
that's so interesting that he
right?
perceived you to not be that into him.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued because, like, looking back, I feel like I was like quite present. But I guess because it was a blind date and because it was essentially a setup, you in those like in that first date, you're almost just like fact finding, and you haven't had the messages exchanging, like finding out about each other. I literally like didn't know like did he have brothers and sisters? Where did he live? All of that information you're kind of finding out. Anyway, he got in touch with me and said, it'd be really nice to go on a second date. And long story short, but we didn't end up going on our second date until the 28th of December because I went down I had the COVID booster and had a very bad reaction, was really unwell. And then I got COVID and then it was Christmas. So I actually cancelled on him 3 times for our second date. And then we finally met at the end of December. And being totally truthful, I was a bit like, by then it had been so long and our first date had felt kind of more like I say, like a bit more transactional, like fact finding. So I was a bit like perhaps not thinking it was going to go anywhere. Anyway, I remember we met up and we went for coffee, and the poor guy, I only gave him like a 2-hour slot because I was basically meeting a friend for lunch and meeting a friend for dinner. And I remember meeting him and we just sat and had coffee. And I still really clearly remember being sat there and just thinking, oh my God, this guy is just so nice. He's so kind. Like he just has this real like, if anyone listening has met him, they'll know this. He's got this like kindness that like exudes out of him. Anyway, so we had this second date. I had to rush off to my dinner, and I remember texting him afterwards being like, oh, it was so nice to see you. Anyway, then we got to New Year's Day. We'd been texting a little bit the night before, and then we were just texting about like what were we both up to. And I'd just moved into a new house at this point. I'd left London, I'd moved to St Albans. And I basically just texted him being like, and he always refers to this. So I said, just putting it out there, but if you wanted to meet up today, you'd be welcome to come to St Albans. Anyway, lo and behold, he did. And I was really impressed that he put in the effort to come and kind of see me. And again, I just remember being sat there on my sofa, just being like, this guy is so lovely. He's just a really, really kind-hearted guy. Anyway, so we continued dating for a while. We had a bit of a blip in the middle where Liam was a bit like I think the pressure of having met through an agency was a bit like, it's got to be like perfect. You've got to be set that this is the person. And meeting a bit later, I think you go in with your own life already quite established. And one of the things for Liam and I was Liam was very established in Barnes and I just moved to St Albans. And apparently I'd made very clear on our first date that I wanted to only be in St Albans. And so I think there was a few kind of reservations there. He was like, oh, I don't know if this is, if we're on the same page. Anyway, we kind of continued dating. And I remember for my birthday, he took me away for a weekend. And it was the first time, I guess, we kind of moved from just kind of casually dating to be properly like a couple. And we had the most incredible weekend. And I still remember the post that I put on Instagram just being like, this man has shown me kindness I didn't know existed, because kindness was definitely not a trait I'd experienced in some of the past relationships I'd been in. And so my birthday was April the 16th. And we found out we were pregnant on May the 26th, I think it was. And I should just be totally transparent. We had not had a conversation about trying for a baby, wanting kids. I remember actually early on, he did say, so do you want to be a mum one day? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Like I've got nieces and nephews who I adore. And I said, what about you? And he was like, yeah, I absolutely love like my nieces and nephews. But we'd never got to the stage of being like, shall we have a baby together? So we're 5 months in, and we found out we were pregnant, and we weren't even physically together at the time. He was in London, I was in St Albans when I did this pregnancy test. And I won't lie, my first reaction was, oh shit, I hope I can swear, by the way, because it was a surprise. That's the only way to say it. And it was a lot of mixed emotions, because I was like, this is everything I've always wanted. I've been desperate to be a mum, but happening in not the way I ever thought it would. I thought I'd be married. I thought I'd be, have been with someone for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And suddenly 5 months in with this guy who I still was getting to know, and I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, oh my God, like how to react. And obviously it was super early. I think I was only like 3 weeks pregnant. Anyway, so then had to go up to London the next day to tell Liam, and he was understandably shocked. We were both a bit like, what, how? And then I was like, come on, we're adults. These things happen, kind of thing. But I guess it always looked at people who find out they're pregnant unexpectedly and been like, how would that happen to you? And there's me having it happen to me. Anyway.
The thing I just love about the story is that, and this is why you were on the podcast, because you had worried so much about fertility for all the obvious reasons, and you'd done the rounds of egg freezing and everything. And then it was like the universe just saying to you, and I really believe it, like, Nikki, don't worry. You're fine. And I want to say that, and maybe we'll talk about this after you finish now, but there's just so much rhetoric around, if you are 36, you have to try for a year to have a baby, and so much of the, because we hear a lot of stories, and obviously there are a lot of women who do struggle, and I do not for 1 minute want to belittle that and say, I know so many people out there at every age can struggle with fertility, but we very rarely hear this kind of story where it's like you've gone through rounds of egg freezing, you had thought it might take you a long time to get pregnant, and look what happened. Like you said, it was a surprise, and it wasn't like you were trying to conceive. So I just want to almost like pinpoint that of the story, how wonderful it is to hear. And I think there's not enough voices out there saying these stories, and how obviously it completely threw both of you, and you weren't, didn't, like you said, anticipate it, but like universe, the world works in mysterious ways.
Totally. And you're so right. And I remember sitting in the clinic where I did my egg freezing, and this doctor very coldly telling me, you've got low egg count, your biological clock is ticking, like you need to like freeze your eggs now. And I literally moved within 4 weeks. I think I started my first round of egg freezing, and I look back and I'm like, my God, like, and I'm super grateful for it. Like, we fell pregnant without perhaps intending to, and without having to really like try that hard. And it was something, I guess, when that was all part of the like emotions that were factored into like when I found out I was pregnant. It was like, okay, I'm dating someone new, like we haven't even talked about this, but also I was pretty much told that I would struggle to conceive, and here it is happening like much more easily than I ever anticipated. So it was a real mix of emotions, I guess, of like shock, surprise, happiness, fear, so many mixed emotions. And I feel like that kind of, almost that catalyst of finding out we were pregnant was what kind of cemented mine and Liam's relationship. We obviously had to have some pretty challenging conversations of like, okay, we don't even live together. We haven't even talked about being parents. Like, this is a huge kind of curveball. And we had to just be like, are we secure enough in our relationship? We'd only been going out for 5 months. Like, especially as society would tell you, you need to be dating for at least a year or two, then you get engaged, and then you think about having babies. So it was like, wow, timeline's completely backwards here. But we were both being that bit older. We were able to have what Liam refers to as awkward, brave and kind conversations. And like, one of Liam's best traits, as well as his kindness, is he is a phenomenal communicator, and he has done lots and lots of work. He works with a coach, so I'm very lucky. He's very, very emotionally intelligent and mature. But that kind of started this pattern for us of, let's lean into these conversations. Let's lean into the fact that we might be doing things differently. Like, you've always wanted kids, I've always wanted kids. Like, let's go with this. And we made a decision basically there and then that we were going to go ahead, and that it would be the right thing to do to move in together. Liam hadn't met my parents, by the way, I should caveat at this point, and he'd been a bit resistant because he was like, we need to be more set of like, is this it kind of thing. So the poor guy had to meet my parents. I think it was 3 days after finding out we were pregnant. So to meet my mum and dad and be like, I'm the guy that got your daughter pregnant, nice to meet you kind of thing. And
what a situation. Wow.
Right? And we went out for a dinner, and we were out for, I don't know, 2 hours, and it didn't get brought up once that we were pregnant. It was just like a normal meet the parents kind of thing. And then we all got back to my parents' apartment, and Liam was like, I think we should probably address the elephant in the room, like, we're pregnant. So, and he navigated that conversation brilliantly. But
everyone already knew at that point, but no one was saying anything.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and my parents knew. They knew. Liam's parents knew, but basically my parents were like, it's for you and Liam to bring up. They didn't want to kind of add any pressure. But yeah, it was like, again, against the timelines, it was backwards, right? It meet the parents after you find out you're pregnant kind of thing. But that was just the way it was.
I also want to share that that's what happened to us. So for everyone, just to know, I'll keep it very brief, that Ellie and I, we started dating in the September, and we already fell pregnant in the June. And so we've been together, it was a little longer than you and Liam, but it was like 9-10 months when we fell pregnant. And it was a little bit different because we had those conversations of saying that we were ready to start trying, and we actually had decided that, kind of against both of our cultural backgrounds and our religion, that we would not wait until we got engaged and married. Just, I guess that is age related. I'll be honest, that it was related to the fact that I was already coming up to my 36th birthday, and we were like, listen, if we're going to get engaged, probably won't be in the next month or so, will be within the next 6 months to a year. And we wanted to have some time to plan a wedding, at least a year. It would be an abroad wedding, so family to be able to book flights and everything. And then I was like, then I'll be 38, and I knew I had okay fertility from my tests and egg freezing, but it just still felt like this arbitrary, like, we're just going to do this and then wait a year and then. And I said, we both had decided that, you know what, we want to be parents and we're ready. And it all just, it happened within the same, it was like the quickest manifestation ever. Like, we had the conversation, and then within 3 weeks we were like, with a positive pregnancy test. So because I live abroad, and because Ellie hadn't been yet to visit my family, and actually, funnily enough, we started dating on like the month that all my family came to visit me. So they didn't meet him yet, because I was like on the 3rd date with him. And so no one had met him. And then it was funny because I got onto FaceTime with my mum, and I just had the kind of the first scan that you do to check, like the first ultrasound to check that there is a baby there. And that was it, like it was at like I think 6 or 7 weeks where you first see the heartbeat. I don't know if you have that in the UK, but you have it here. And when we did the thing, I took a picture of it, and I literally got on FaceTime and I was like, Mum, I think it's about time that you met Ellie. We were literally coming back to visit the family a week later. So he was going to meet them anyway, but I wanted to tell my mum before how sick I'd been feeling, because I knew that she had to buy lots of crackers and lots of specific sweets and stuff that I needed for the awful symptoms of the first trimester. Anyway, so I wanted to tell her, and it was just so hilarious because I got the phone and I went, this is Ellie. And he's like sitting there and he's like, hi. And they're like, hey. And I had like a few awkward conversation, bit of back and forth, small talk. And then I went, Mum, just check your WhatsApp. And then she opened it and it was a picture of the scan. And it was literally like, here, meet my partner. Oh, by the way, we're having a baby. And her face, I've got this photo of it, literally her mouth, she was like, she couldn't believe it. And I'm like, I know you have, your parents already have grandchildren, but I'm the first one in my family to have kids. And my mum and dad have been, when I say gagging to have grandchildren, it's like all they've ever wanted. And it's like, they make digs at me all the time. And she was just, couldn't believe it. But it was that exact same thing of doing things in the incorrect order. And they met, when they first met Ellie, they loved him when he came to visit it. And then afterwards I was like, but did they love you because you already knocked me up, or was it true love? So yeah, it was just a funny story. And I think that's why both of our stories are interesting to listen to, because although it is becoming less and less, I'd say more and more common to get married after having kids, like we know that it's something that as generations and time goes on, that's happening. I'd say 90% of the people that I know don't do it that way around, and we both did it in the opposite order. Did you feel the response of other people from that? And I guess, how was your perception of doing things quote unquote on your own timeline?
Yeah, so it's interesting in terms of the response that I received from people. I guess I was worried about sharing it with friends and family, of people being like, oh my God, you've only been together for 5 months. Are you mad? That's crazy. Why are you doing this kind of thing? And actually the response was the complete opposite. Everyone was just so happy for me, because I think they could see in the relationship that I was developing with Liam, the contentment that it had brought me. And for those that had met him, they were like, he is just a really, really great guy. And I think also they were just like, a lot of my friends were like, it's just your time. It's meant to be. And I think I was more worried about communicating it than other people. And actually, I don't think anyone asked me or kind of gave any kind of oh my God, isn't it a bit soon? I had, and I know you have the same, lots of people ask, actually, no, sorry, no one actually has asked me, but I feel like lots of people wanted to know, was the baby conceived with frozen eggs? No, obviously it wasn't. It was a surprise. But I guess, I just received a really positive response in terms of how I felt about the timelines. And maybe because I was 35 at the time, I think I had perhaps already decided or reached acceptance that I may well have children before I get married, if I got married at all, because I think the whole concept of needing to be married was no longer of significance or of such significance to me as it had been before. I was a bit actually, if I'm going to spend my life with someone and have a child with them, I don't need a piece of paper to make us committed, or whatever it might, however you may look at it. So I guess, maybe I'd already reached acceptance, because similar to what you said, I was like, well, I'm 35, so actually if we did things conventionally, we'll get engaged in 2 years, then we get married, and then we'd have a baby. And I was like, well, then I'll be 39, 40. And actually that felt too late for what I wanted. So I think I'd reached acceptance about the timelines, but more being a bit precious about the fact of like, oh my God, we've only been together for such a short period of time. That was perhaps a timeline that I was a bit like, oh my God, is this crazy? But I was just like, this is the way my life is working out, and I've got to just trust this. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be right now. And I guess that was kind of, again, it kind of came back where I was like, this is the way it's going to be for me. This is how my story unfolds. It's not perhaps how I had expected it, and against the manual that I know you reference in coaching of like how I thought it would be. And it was not how I thought I'd find out I was pregnant. It's not how I expected everything to be, but that was just how my story unfolded. And like now looking back, I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. And I think that's just such a good lesson learned for anyone here listening, is that we do not know how our stories are going to unfold. And when we try to put specific deadlines on things, we try to pressure people into being people that actually are meant for us. I'm saying that with all honesty of my past relationship, where I was pushing for wedding and engagement because I was like, we've been together X amount of time, we need to move on, and you know, all those things, and we just don't know how things are going to pan out. And I say this all the time to people, and again, it might be triggering, but you just never know what's waiting around the corner. You just never do. If you would have told me that I would be already pregnant and in a serious relationship with somebody by June 2023, when I had been single in September and freezing my eggs, I would have just been like, what are you talking about? That just won't happen. How? I didn't have any evidence to know that was going to happen. But that's the thing about life, is that you just, for good and for bad, do not know what's going to happen the day after. And actually, I started a new, I'm really trying to keep all my Instagram content and majority of my podcast content as it was. Obviously, I'm in a different life stage now and going through something different, but I've made a promise to my audience and, my community that it's not going to turn into talking just about babies or anything. So I set up like a side account called Turning Pregnant instead of Turning 30. And I've, invited people, if they're interested in knowing a little bit about being pregnant at 36 and following my story, that I'll be sharing some posts there. And I was doing a Q&A, and a lot of people sent messages, sent questions, asking lots of things about, like you said, did you use your frozen eggs, and how hard was it for you to get pregnant, and what are the biggest changes you're experiencing, and did you always knew this was going to happen this way and everything. And somebody asked me a really good question. They said, do you experience guilt for going through this? She said, I experienced guilt as somebody who really wanted it and didn't have it, and now I have it, I know how other people feel. And I answered the question, and then when I was answering, I got a bit emotional, because I was like, of course I feel guilty, because I also remember sitting in the room in September. I think it was about 3 days before my egg retrieval. It was the day that everyone's kids went back to school, like the 5th of September or something. And my whole feed was just with people like first day of nursery, first day at school, all my friends with pictures of their 2 or 3 kids, and feeling this feeling in my stomach, like, oh my God, like it's so hard. And I was looking around the IVF clinic, like thinking, well, everyone here is struggling with this, and it's so hard to be on a different timeline. And then thinking that I wrote that literally 9 months before going to the doctor's office and having the positive pregnancy test and everything. So it's just to echo what you said, like it's you just don't know what's going to happen, and we have to just almost come to terms with and come into deep acceptance with it will happen the way it is going to happen. And there's almost like this element of having to surrender control and let go of how you thought it would be, how you thought it would feel, which is, I know, something that you've also been thinking a lot about. Same for me as well. And to just let life happen in a way, which is weird to say.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think also like what your expectations of how it will be. I had huge expectations of what being pregnant would be like, because I had wanted to have a baby. I'd wanted to be pregnant for so long. And I found pregnancy really, really tough. I didn't have an easy pregnancy at all. I was really unwell. I had chronic migraines for, I think, like 16 weeks. I then had severe pelvic girdle pain, which meant I could barely walk. So I think I probably enjoyed in total about 3 weeks of the pregnancy. And I'd imagined that it would be the most amazing experience of my life and I'd love every single second of it. And that isn't the reality. And so even when you get to these life stages that you've craved so much, actually it doesn't mean that they're going to be perfect. And, your expectations versus reality are two very, very different things. And I guess I just had to sit in that and keep reminding myself like how grateful I was to have fallen pregnant, but to also recognize that like from what you see from the outside isn't always what's going on. Like from the outside, anything like, if I posted a picture on Instagram or shared a picture, people were like, oh my God, like you're blooming, you look amazing. And deep down, I was like, I haven't left bed for 3 days because I felt so horrendous. And that definitely took me a while to kind of get my head around like it not being as I expected. And the same with like then going on to be a mother. Like my son Arlo is now 10 months old. The experience of becoming a mum is totally different to what I thought it would be. And I just didn't perhaps envisage it to have the feelings that I've had since having a child, because I didn't know what it would be like. But I think it's just accepting, like you say, you just never know what is around the corner. You also don't know how you will experience something, because everyone's experiences are so, so different.
100%. And I think as well, like going back to even what we're both speaking about at the start of our journeys of coming out of these past relationships and being single at that age and making the most of that time, albeit having those challenges, like we didn't expect that to happen. And then it did. And then you kind of like adjust your life accordingly. And then when you were 35, you met someone and didn't expect within 5 months to be pregnant. And then, just to continue the story, within however long, I can't remember the time difference, but you had this option to relocate and go and live in Singapore. But then here you are living in Singapore. And it's like it's just such a lesson of life. Like there were always going to be these things. And 100% want to say, we always imagine how we're going to feel in our heads about the next steps. And it very, very, very rarely lives up to expectations. And I do think that when you're single, you put this being in a relationship and being in a partnership on this huge pedestal. Like, if I can only just meet that perfect person and have a life partner and live with someone and have all the opportunities and the steps that come with that, then I will feel amazing. My life will be amazing. Now, it's not amazing, and it will be. I did that, but I always kept myself in check because I knew from coaching people, by the way, that I coach single women and women in relationships. And I knew that your mental state, your mental health was not directly correlated to being with a partner. But it's just an important reminder, because like you said, you expected to feel a certain way meeting someone and being pregnant and then becoming a mum. And it was just different, not different bad. It's just different from what you thought. And I'll also share, it's funny because I think that actually me and you, although we've had really similar age timelines, have really different approach to being a parent. Because for me, I did always know I was going to be a parent in the end, and I did freeze my eggs and it was something that I wanted. But I never, ever felt ready to be a mum. I still don't, saying that with, in this situation, but I was the opposite. Like it was almost like, oh, if I didn't have a biological clock, then I would not even think about this right now. And I'm not a maternal person. Love dogs. Really love my friends' babies for like hugs and to give them back. And I think that I've had maybe like the opposite. Again, I've had a tough first few months of pregnancy, but I think that for me, it will be the opposite feeling of like, oh, I never expected that I would like this. And actually what I'm going through now is I just started feeling the baby kicking more the last few weeks. And I'm like, oh, like it actually is okay. Like, I always really was very, very nervous to be pregnant. And I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, okay. Like maybe I'm going to really love my baby. I am. But, it's just funny that every woman has a different perception and expectation of how that stage of her life will be. And even if you don't want kids, how your life will look at X age. And yeah, I know I've said the same point again and again, but it's just always different so that you actually really think it will be.
Yeah, and I think if I look at every single milestone that I've gone through in the last 2 years, every single one of them has been different. Finding out we were pregnant was totally different to how I was expecting it. We got engaged in June this year. And I mean, that perhaps I didn't have an expectation on. That was an amazing, amazing moment. But actually what happened afterwards is we got engaged in June. At the same time, there was this background conversation going on about Liam applying for this job in Singapore and possibly like relocating. And we then got legally married on August the 1st. So we were only engaged for 2 months before we then got legally married, less than that, 6 weeks. We hadn't even got our engagement rings until a week, because we were having them made, until a week before we actually got married. So again, all those timelines, I was like, what? And then we got legally married, and our legal wedding was an amazing, amazing day. But it was literally just our immediate family. It was at a registry office, and then we had a wonderful dinner. But it wasn't the big, big wedding I was expecting. And instead, we're doing that big wedding in 2 years' time in Mallorca. Again, I never thought I'd get married abroad. So everything has happened not how I expected it. And you just can never tell. And there is no way in hell, if you'd asked me a year ago, would I be living in Singapore, that I'd have said yes. I just moved to St Albans, as I said. I told Liam I wanted to be in St Albans, and he gave up Barnes and moved to St Albans. And somehow I gave up St Albans and moved to Singapore, and I'm 14 hours from everyone. But I'm so grateful that it's happened. Now I'm here and I'm having the most amazing experience that I'm super grateful for. But literally, I sometimes still have to be like, is this actually my life that I'm living? Because it's so not what I expected. And that's actually probably, and I can say it now, I appreciate with hindsight, probably the best thing about it is it's not what I expected, because actually that makes it exciting and different and unique, I guess. And I'm kind of proud that, Liam and I are where we are. We're in a very happy, stable, loving relationship. We found out we were pregnant. We moved in together. We got engaged, we got married very quickly legally, and then we moved halfway across the world. And that's just the way our story is unfolding. And I love that about it. And we'll get married in 2 years' time. So, and I remember actually him saying to me at one point, I'd been pregnant for longer than I'd been not pregnant in the time that we knew each other, right? It's 2 years in December, and we have a 10-month-old son, and you obviously are pregnant for 10 months. It's nuts when I look at it, but that's just the way my life was meant to pan out.
Oh, I just have the biggest grin on my face just to say how obsessed I am with the story. And it's just been such a pleasure to be alongside you and, going through it all. And something that you do when you work as a coach is when your client comes to you and is in that space of not necessarily believing that they are where they're meant to be, or struggling to come to terms with their stage of life, which is obviously a lot of the work that I do with my clients, is that I hold space to believe that it will happen for you. And it's really giving you that confidence that I know you took that, and you obviously created something amazing for yourself even before any of these things happen. You really did grab that opportunity to be authentically you and just to be Nikki and to do all of the things. But I did know that eventually your story you would reach the goals that you wanted, and your life plans would pan out. And it's been so just fun and amazing to watch it actually happen and see how gracefully you've worked through big challenges, big things, like you said, big conversations. And you are obviously, it's great to see with a partner who's also so into personal development and coaching and like you said, so communicative. And it's just amazing. And I think it's such a good example. And that's why I invited you back on, to update the listeners, to update everyone who follows Turning 30 and knows who you are. You've been as an honoured guest, and I'm sure people know both of us now through the community. And it's just, you're such an inspiration, and just thank you so much for coming on and so vulnerably sharing, I guess, all of your story and authentically telling people how it was and how it's been for you. I guess the last thing I just want to finish on is, what piece of advice, or what would you say? And I kind of want to ask two, so I'll ask it together. One to the past version of you who, was going through this, but let's even say to somebody else who's in that phase, maybe out of a bad relationship, or, 33, 35, 36, still single, but they do want those things. And they're struggling to get to that thought of, oh, this is happening to me for a reason. What would you want to tell that person?
I think probably the main thing I would say is, take the time to invest in yourself and get comfortable with being you, because I think that is ultimately what allowed me to get to where I am now. Was I reached a level of comfort and acceptance that I was exactly where I was meant to be. And like I said, that wasn't an easy thought for me to get to initially, but between the breakup from the relationship I had before to then meeting Liam was 2-3 years. That 2-3 years was a period of really working hard on myself and working through some limiting beliefs that I had, and all of those kind of things. So I think investing in yourself is the most rewarding thing you can do. And also, I guess, mapping out what it is you want. Like, I mapped out that I really wanted to be in a relationship. I really wanted to have children. And the two things that I did that were within my control was I froze my eggs and I signed up to a dating agency. So I guess manifesting, for want of a better description, like actually put out into the world what it is that you want, like do the things that you can control that make you feel better. And like when I did your group coaching course, for example, the reason I did that was I was desperate to find a tribe of women who felt similar to me and could understand how I feel. And we're still in touch now. I love those girls, like, you know, lots of them, we still update each other and things like that. But all of those things, I guess, helped me to reach a level of comfort in just being me that I guess I wouldn't have done had I just kind of sat and felt the victim mentality and struggled to move past it. And I'm not going to say my advice is like, you know, there's plenty more fish in the sea or it will happen one day, because I know that that's actually really triggering. I think for me, taking control and doing something about it is the best piece of advice I can offer. And the other thing I would just say, just like we've touched on, like the timelines and all of that. And I have got everything I've ever wanted and I feel incredibly grateful. But I think the thing to just also be mindful of is you only, from the outside, things may look one way and, you know, there's lots more to it. Like I found the transition to being a mum is something I've always wanted. The transition being a mum has been a lot harder than I expected it to be in terms of like the change in my identity. By the time I had Arlo, I was 36. I'd built up a successful career. I had traveled. I had the freedom and ability to do whatever I like and carved out this wonderful life. And like having him is the best thing ever, but it's also the hardest job ever. And it's such a shift in my identity, and one I guess I didn't anticipate that I would experience. So, you know, you can wish and want for all of these things, but it doesn't mean things are going to be perfect and they're going to be straightforward and they're going to be easy. Like the timelines are like this arbitrary thing that we kind of think we have to meet, but actually like the feelings and emotions that go with all of those life changes, I think they affect you regardless of your age. It's still a massive life change and it's still a massive transition. And letting, you know, I guess the one thing I would say that being older, I think is different is meeting a partner that much later. So I was 30, was I 35, 36? Liam was 43 at the time of meeting. Like we both had very established lives and we, you know, like I said, I wanted to be in St Albans, he wanted to be in Barnes. Like merging those two worlds, I think is harder because you both kind of, you spent a long time being like, well, this is my life. I've built it. I love it. I don't want to let it go. And that's where I guess meeting a partner who can communicate and who has kindness at his core has enabled us to do that. So meeting the right kind of person was what's enabled us to make this transition, I guess, so successfully.
Yeah, and I always say that's actually two sides of a coin of meeting someone older. You have more expectations, more set in stone lives, like exactly what happened for you. It's the same with me. You have more baggage, right? More traumas, more things that you've gone through than if you meet somebody when you're much younger. But the double side of the coin is that you also have these communication skills and this ability to navigate difficult conversations and maturity that you don't have if you meet someone when you're younger. So it's definitely, you know, there's so many challenges with it and I don't want to sweep over those. I agree, like it is really challenging, but I think that if you've done the work on yourself,
exactly,
then the tools that you have are very different from before. And I also know that with me and Ellie, like if I, you know, and we've not had time to speak about it now, but the story that of how our friendship evolved into a relationship, and that was these big conversations about age, because we literally are the inverse. So Ellie's 6 years younger than me, so we had the opposite age difference. So we had to have those big conversations quite early on about my age and having kids and everything. It wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened if it was for me 5 years before, because I wouldn't have had the ability to deal with it and the maturity and the communication skills to actually deal with it, and him also. So it's really important in meeting somebody or knowing that when you meet somebody when you're older, like things are different and our priorities change. Like, and I love what you said about you wanted kindness, and that was so important for you and you hadn't wanted that before. And for me it was like very much the same with emotional intelligence and maturity. It was like the next person I'd learned from my last relationship, like the next person I meet, I have to be able to like fully bring myself to the conversation, and that he has to as well. So yeah. Oh, I feel like we could carry on talking forever. There's so much to say. I feel like I've got even more questions that I want to ask you, but I'm going to leave it because we've already been recording for an hour. But Nikki, again, just want to thank you so much for coming on for the third time. I'm sure you'll be back for more soon. And just like congratulations for everything that's happened. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening. And I'll see everyone on the podcast next week.